Hello again. Good night from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. Here's my selective news summary for June the 23rd and 24th, 2020. I will provide some commentaries on the news. Of course, I don't want to infringe on any copyrights, but to give those YouTube viewers who want this kind of independent news source with some commentaries a chance to educate themselves about the world's current events. According to Reuters news agency, US Justice Department employees are testifying in the US Congress on political interference. US sanctions 5 Iranian ship captains for bringing oil to Venezuela, according to US Secretary of State or Foreign Minister Mike Pompeo. United States warns Russia and China of United Nations isolation if Iran arms ban extension is blocked. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls on Israel to abandon its plan to annex Jewish settlements on Jordan's West Bank. The Mexican President Andrés López Manuel Obrador says that the Trump meeting is likely in July, when the current North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada and the United States and Mexico will be changed into a looser free trade agreement called the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. No sweet victory for Syria's authoritarian president Bashar al-Assad in the civil war, which has continued since 2011, as the country's economy collapses and sanctions by the United Nations hit the country. Also, European Union legislators are demanding that Israel scrap its plan to annex the West Bank's Jewish settlements. The United Nations says that the Islamic State in Iran and Syria has evolved to become a global network that inspires attacks worldwide. This sharply contradicts Donald Trump's claim made in 2019 that supposedly ISIS had been fully defeated, because ISIS had temporarily, at least, lost almost all of the territories that it had once held in the Middle East. The European Union hopes to reopen borders for outsiders from July, but it will review individual nations' COVID-19 situation every 2 weeks, according to diplomats, and a document laying out criteria that could keep travelers from the United States and Russia out. Turkey tries journalists over reporting deaths of intelligence officers. Then next to CNN, cable news network. The right-wing authoritarian and populist president of Brazil, Mr. Jair Bolsonaro, has been ordered by a judge to wear a mask to protect him from the coronavirus during his public appearances or risk a fine. Russia kicks off lavish Victory Day parade following coronavirus delay. The United Nations and telecommunications companies in Africa take on COVID-19 with Meet Benin's zero waste farmer inspiring an agricultural movement. Schools in Ontario, Canada's most populous province, will now teach first graders financial literacy and coding to better prepare them for the future employment. North Korea suspends plans for increased military pressure against South Korea. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attacks China. China's political detention of 2 Canadians as prison letters are sent from Beijing and are published. A new threat to global trade. Exhausted crews want off cargo ships now. CEO fears Japan could lose a fifth of its restaurants. Then to British Broadcasting Corporation. According to the International Monetary Fund, the British economy can lose 10% of its gross domestic product this year, but Italy, France, and Spain will be even worse off. The US virus cases are at their highest level for 2 months. Pakistan plane crash was human error. A newcomer beats Trump nominee in congressional primary. The president of Kosovo, a still partly disputed, mostly Albanian state on the Balkan Peninsula of southeastern Europe, faces war crimes indictment. Mel Gibson and Winona Ryder at odds over anti-Semitism claims. Ghana apologizes to Nigeria for embassy demolition. Statue vandalized in row or dispute over French slavery code. And then to the Philippine headlines. Philippine news headlines from the Philippine Star. Quantity restrictions lifted on grocery items. The Philippine House of Representatives probes the chaotic overseas Filipino workers' repatriation. The Department of Interior and Local Government sends more troops to Cebu, southern Philippines, to enforce the lockdown. The government policy on transport is not pro-rich, claims the presidential spokesman. The Bayanihan law expires today, no more emergency powers. The Food and Drug Administration warns of unlicensed hand sanitizers. According to the Malacanang Palace, Health Secretary Francisco Duque III can decide himself if he wants to resign. Channel News Asia. GE 2020, PAP unveils 4 new faces, including former People's Association head Desmond Tan. People's Action Party, which has governed Singapore since 1959 already. Singapore, according to Vivian Balakrishnan, is to take a step-by-step approach on reopening border with Malaysia. Singapore reports 191 new COVID-19 cases, including 1 nurse at Nang Teng Phong Hospital. Abattoir's cooling system helped spread COVID-19, according to a German expert. India calls in army to run medical facilities in Delhi as COVID-19 cases surge. Thailand reports 1 new imported COVID-19 case, marks 30 days with no local transmissions. Office cluster pushes Tokyo coronavirus cases to highest in 7 weeks, according to a report. Malaysian police arrest 2 more people for using drones to smuggle drugs between JB and Singapore. Social taboos hinder Indonesia's fight against COVID-19. Australia reports its first COVID-19 death in more than a month and calls in the army after COVID-19 surge. Switzerland is to launch a COVID-19 tracing app. Australian Broadcasting Corporation news. Australia's struggling arts industry is to get a 250 million Australian dollar coronavirus rescue package. The state of Victoria in southeastern Australia requests Australian Defence Force support to help with coronavirus response. Up to 250 jobs in the Australian Broadcasting Corporation are to go. Programming axed to deal with an 84 million Australian dollar budget cut. Is there even such a thing as a second wave? Plenty of stock. New supermarkets reintroduce item limits in Victoria as a precautionary step. 10 new coronavirus cases in New South Wales, which is, by the way, Australia's largest, most populous federal state, as Premier Gladys Berejiklian calls Victoria outbreak a wake-up call. A man charged with ferocious stabbing of woman at Darwin home. Collingwood and Geelong off to Australian Football League's new Perth hub for round 7. Tiny species of rock wallaby is related to the kangaroo, but is a smaller species, bounces back from devastating bushfire. New Zealand Herald. Audrey Young, light rail dispute gives national gift, the National Party. New Zealand will hold parliamentary elections in September 2020, and the current Labour Party Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who has been in a coalition government since 2017 with the right-wing nationalist New Zealand First Party, will try to win a second term, while the centre-right National Party will try to get enough seats to be able to form a government either on its own or with a coalition partner. Incredible footage shows giant great white sharks stalking surfers. Rotorua official COVID-19 case, no surprise to quarantined travelers. It's not so kind rise in hostility towards New Zealanders looking to come home. Sacked real estate agent suggested vendors should share profits from sale. One of the best lawyers in Auckland struck off over miscarriage of justice. 2 new virus cases, one in locked down Rotorua hotel. Then, turning to African news. Zambia coronavirus, 1,489 cases. Drivers, air travelers import new cases. Inside Uganda's proposed scientific election analysis. Nigeria coronavirus, 21,371 cases. Mandatory test for Kaduna Parliament. Burundi restores Prime Minister post. Members of Parliament endorse new Vice President. Gambia denies plans to relax homosexuality laws. Former Algerian Prime Minister jailed for 12 years for corruption. Libya exhuming mass graves in western city Tarhuna. South Africa court cancels the arrest warrant of former President Jacob Zuma in his 1999 bribery case. Malawi rerun of presidential elections, poll chief warns against unofficial results. Coronavirus in Africa, 324,559 cases, 8,621 deaths, 154,386 recoveries. South Africa urges creditors to back rescue plan. World Bank approves a $750 million loan for Nigeria's power sector. Gabon members of parliament vote to decriminalize homosexuality. Then to Euro news. COVID-19, European Union considers plan to bar US travelers when borders reopen. According to the Europe Mission, Britain must abide by European data rules after Brexit. The transitional period that started on January the 31st, 2020, when Britain formally left the European Union, will end on December the 31st, 2020, with or without a deal, after which Britain will be considered a so-called third country, so neither a member of the European Union nor a membership applicant. And will also, of course, be subject to customs duties and passport checks and so forth, and will have to then bilaterally negotiate any possible semblance of free trade agreement in one or more sectors of its economy with the European Union. Telescope in orbit maps stunning X-ray image of the universe. Kosovo's president, Mr. Hashim Thaci, indicted for war crimes. COVID-19 Live, the World Health Organization warns of 10 million cases, in other words, 10 million recorded infections next week. The European Union is paying migrants to go home and stay there, and it's not working. Turning to YLE news from Finland, a man has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for sexual abuse of children. Most of the victims were aged 9 to 13 and from different parts of Finland. Finland is to loosen travel restrictions based on infection ratios. The energy firm Fortum gets a new boss, Mr. Markus Rauramo. Finland shutters reception centers as few seek asylum during the pandemic. Coronavirus latest, Finland cancels recommendations for seniors, government to end remote working guidelines in August. Canadian Broadcasting Corporation news. Premier Doug Ford of Ontario is Canada's most populous province, speaks as Ontario's two most populous regions enter the next phase of reopening. In Canada, premiers are provincial prime ministers. For example, Premier Ford is a provincial leader of the Progressive Conservative Party. The curious fact is that federally, the Progressive Conservative Party ceased to exist in 2003 or 2004 when it merged with the Canadian Alliance, which was a more right-wing and populist party, to create the current Conservative Party of Canada. Charges to be dropped against First Nations Chief Alan Adam. Toronto International Film Festival plans scaled-down event, virtual red carpets. Analysis, timing is everything, how Canada got into a pandemic economy and how it might get out. Why some CERB recipients are getting smaller payments this month. How new American tariffs on Canadian aluminum could backfire. Parents of Afro-Canadian Saskatchewan teen who committed suicide call for stronger anti-racism action. USA Today. Appeals court orders dismissal of Michael Flynn case. National Guard troops deployed to guard historical monuments in Washington, D.C. South Dakota government on taking down Mount Rushmore, not on my watch. John C. Calhoun statue in South Carolina, is coming down. More than 2 million people signed petition for Elijah McClain, who died after Colorado police placed him in a carotid hold in 2019. Then Washington Post. Prosecutor to testify on alleged politicization inside the Justice Department of the United States. Senate confirms the 200th judicial nominee from Trump, a legacy that will last well beyond November 2020, whether Trump wins a second term or loses. Senate Democrats block a Republican policing bill and are stalling efforts to change practices. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut order quarantine for travelers from some states. Over 13,000 US federal government's workers face a possible furlough of 30 days or longer. Virginia to create first pandemic workplace safety mandates in the United States. Mexico News Daily. New single-day record set by minister sees positive signs in movement of virus numbers. There were 6,288 new cases and 793 deaths reported on Tuesday. An earthquake kills 6 and damages 500 houses in Oaxaca. Most damage is minor, although the magnitude was 7.5 on the Richter scale. Political scientist and supporter of the Social Democratic ruling party, El Movimiento por el Regeneración Nacional, the National Regeneration Movement, predicts rough electoral ride ahead in the 2021 midterm elections, where all the 500 members of the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house of Mexican Congress, will be elected. It will also be a test of popularity for Mexico's Social Democratic president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, even though he will not be able to seek a second term because Mexico strictly limits its presidents to a single term. And any interim president, even if he or she served just one day as a temporary president, will be barred from ever seeking a full term as president, probably in order to prevent a manipulated extension of presidency. Mazatlan hotels focus on health certification in preparation for reopening. COVID at ground zero, solitude was the worst, says doctor who survived. And then Rio Times news from Brazil. Advancing coronavirus pandemic forces countries to step back after reopening. In an unprecedented case, Petrobras forced to compensate investors for misconduct. A locust cloud reaches Argentina and is approaching Brazil. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro prepares a social program to replace brand of the Lula presidency. Oxford survey shows Rio de Janeiro is unprepared to relax social isolation. Former Justice Minister Sergio Moro emerges as Bolsonaro's main adversary in the 2022 presidential elections. So, contrary to Mexico, Brazil does permit its presidents to seek a second term, but contrary to Mexico, in Brazil, the presidential term is only 4 years. Sao Paulo hits a new record of COVID-19 deaths with 434 deaths recorded in 24 hours. Then newsnow.co.uk, other selected news from Latin America. Almost 400 Managua City Hall workers on leave with COVID-19 symptoms in Nicaragua. Venezuela is grateful to Russia for establishing dialogue with opposition, according to the foreign minister. Latin America tops 100,000 coronavirus deaths. Then Sweden, Costa Rica, same paths on climate change, different on COVID-19. Federal judge blocks removal of Honduran boycott in coronavirus-related border restrictions. Economic factors complicate easing lockdown restrictions in Cuba. Guyana election report gives victory to government coalition. Switzerland slaps sanctions on top Nicaragua officials. 18 million barrels of sanctioned Venezuelan oil are stuck at sea. Brazil's economy could fall by 7%. The deficit could top 11% of GDP, according to the country's treasury secretary or finance minister. Then Colombia exceeded 10 million users with fuel gas through networks and is close to some goal. Peru is to update power sector public engagement framework. And still a quick update on the coronavirus situation in the world. According to the worldometers.info website, there are now 9,435,226 recorded human cases of the coronavirus, with a total of 481,965 deaths. Recoveries total 5,097,016, active cases 3,854,000, 56,245, and of those cases, 58,037 are serious and critical. The top 10 countries in terms of the number of recorded coronavirus cases are still the United States, with over 2,440,000 recorded coronavirus cases and over 123,000 total deaths. The same figures in that order in Brazil are over 1,157,000 and over 52,000. For Russia, over 606,000 and over 8,000. For India, over 472,000 and over 14,000. For Britain, over 306,000 and over 43,000. For Spain, over 293,000 and over 28,000. For Peru, over 260,000 and over 8,000. For Chile, over 254,000 and over 4,000. For Italy, over 238,000 and over 34,000. And for Iran, over 212,000 and almost exactly 10,000. But the following countries still have on this list under 100 deaths from the coronavirus: Singapore 26, Bahrain 68, Ghana 95, Nepal 24, Ivory Coast 58, Uzbekistan 19, Senegal 93, Tajikistan 52, Haiti 89, Guinea 29, Ethiopia 78, Gabon 39, Djibouti 52, Venezuela 35, Kyrgyzstan 42, Thailand 58, Central African Republic 37, Somalia 90, Costa Rica 12, Cuba 85, Maldives 8, Nicaragua 74, Albania 47, Sri Lanka 11, Estonia 69, South Sudan 36, Iceland 10, Lithuania 78, Madagascar 16, Equatorial Guinea 32, Lebanon 33, Slovakia 28, Guinea-Bissau 19, New Zealand 22, Zambia 18, Paraguay 13, Sierra Leone 55, Palestine 3, Tunisia 50, Latvia 30, Congo 37, Jordan 9, Niger 67, Cyprus, probably the Greek Cypriot Republic, 19, Cape Verde 8, Burkina Faso 53, Georgia 14, Benin 13, Uruguay 25, Chad 74, Andorra 52, Uganda none, Malawi 11, Rwanda 2, Mozambique 5, Sao Tome and Principe 12, San Marino 42, Eswatini or the former Swaziland 7, Jamaica 10, Malta 9, Liberia 34, Libya 17, Togo 13, Zimbabwe 6, Tanzania 21, Taiwan 7, Montenegro 9, Vietnam none, Mauritius 10, Suriname 9, Myanmar 6, Comoros 7, Syria 7, Mongolia none, Guyana 12, Angola 10, Bermuda 9, Burundi 1, Eritrea none, Brunei 3, Cambodia none, Trinidad and Tobago 8, Bahamas 11, Monaco 4, Aruba 3, Barbados 7, Botswana 1, Liechtenstein 1, Namibia, Bhutan, none. Gambia, 2. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, none. Antigua and Barbuda, 3. East Timor, none. Belize, 2. Grenada, Laos, St. Lucia, Dominica, Fiji, Lesotho, St. Kitts and Nevis, all none. Then Vatican City, none. Seychelles, none. Western Sahara, 1. Papua New Guinea, none. So this was my summary of the latest world news, and I wish you a safe remainder of the week.